What's up, everybody, and welcome to episode 38 of PlayStation Fix. My name is Will Robinson, and joining me this week we got Kyle Prawl.
Hey, sir. Good to be
Hey,
here.
good. I'm glad you're here because you have to talk about our topic because I haven't played it yet. Our
Yeah.
topic this week is a game that just came out that I'm actually really excited to check out eventually. Kyle's gotten to play most of it already, and that would be Deus Ex: Mankind Divided.
Yes, yes.
So I got to play it at E3 before, and after we've talked about it a little bit before recording this, and I really feel like it just did not. It's just not a game that can demo well. At least
And I,
convey
yeah,
what it
and I,
can do in a demo.
right, right.
From
Yeah,
what
and I
I've
hear
heard.
where you're coming from there. I remember talking to you. Actually, I think I watched the last 5 or 7 minutes of
Yeah.
your demo E3. Like I was standing behind you next to the, I assume Eidos Montreal guys or Square Enix guys.
Hmm.
Yeah, I don't think it. There are definitely games out there that would demo extremely poorly, like adventure games and really slow-paced narrative games. I feel like this
Hmm.
is probably somewhere in between where it's like the I'm trying to think what a good section of the game would be because you've got, it is an action RPG or a shooter RPG, however you'd classify it. And so your character growth and the investment you have in Jensen's skills and just understanding why you are in a specific area, like all that is important. You
Hmm.
can't, it's definitely not the kind of game you can just throw somebody into, Prague and be like, all right, go here and
Yeah.
and sneak through this apartment.
Right. And I think the level that I played was kind of like it was like a skyscraper that was partially under construction, and I had to sneak past a bunch of guards that were up there through some like vents and scaffolding or whatever. Or there was some of the guys on the left and right of me playing were just trying to do the offensive approach, and they were
Sure.
still on the early stages of that level after I had beaten it doing it stealthily. So there clearly was an advantage doing that
Yeah,
stealthy.
there.
But
And I can say from, to not spoil too much about the
mhm.
game, like that is by and large the opening section of the game.
Mm.
And but what's interesting about Mankind Divided is that the protagonist has, at least in the very beginning of the game, he has a ton of skills and abilities from the previous title,
Mhm.
which is, I mean, there's good reasons for that. We can talk about that later, but like it is also kind of disorienting for that reason because even I, like, just having played Human Revolution a few times and being excited for this, came into it and I was just even a little bit overwhelmed by it's like, oh, okay, Jensen can already do this, I guess, and well, what else can he do? I don't know. Nobody has showed me anything yet.
Sure. But it does follow that road of the like the classical game reset type of thing or character reset thing where it's got like the guy like God of War is what I think of, where it acknowledges that you reached this point in the previous game, and then there's something that happens that justifies you basically starting over again and building it
Hmm.
back up.
There is, yeah, for sure. And I like the way it's treated in this game. I mean, this is all stuff that's handled very early. I mean, if somebody wants to go totally blind to Deus Ex, don't worry. We're not gonna talk about the story or dive into specifics like that. But their reason for Adam Jensen's abilities being, and I even hesitate to use the word reset because you do actually get a healthy amount of points right from the get-go to choose kind of your initial ability building, your initial tree building. It's
Okay.
not like you just start from zero and then, level one, level two, level three. You actually kind of get to like start yourself off on a path with like 11 points or 10 points that they just give you.
Oh, okay.
So like, so it kind of bridges the gap a little bit. It's like that very opening section that you played, which is a skyscraper in Dubai.
Mm.
That to me, that gave me a taste of all these different things that a superpowered Jensen could do. So that later in the game, when I was making my choices about how I would level up and which augments I would pursue, it's almost like I had a little bit of context already. It's like, okay, I could purchase Smart Vision, and I remember what that does from the opening of the game, but maybe I want to do this instead. Just kind of knowing what those things look and feel like. So,
Sure.
yeah, I liked the way that kind of played out from like a design perspective because then newcomers, you don't feel like you're purchasing your augments totally blind. You actually have a little bit of even in a few minutes, but still just a little bit of experience with them.
Well, that's nice that they kind of ease you into it because I remember that, at least from what I remember anyway, it seems like that was something you could easily screw yourself over. Not
Mhm.
like it would really be super detrimental, but you could easily just like waste a point just because you didn't you didn't take the time to like really thoroughly read everything or research it to the extent that they wanted you to,
Yeah, there
or
were a
like
lot of times where you could like if you're exploring like a police station or something in Human Revolution and you find, some computers that you want to hack or some air vents you want to get
Mhm.
to, but oh shit, I don't have the ability to move heavy objects, so I can't get to it, or I can't
Yeah,
hack a computer like this. Technically, like you said, you can come back later once you've unlocked more things, but the likelihood of a player doing that is kind of slim. That's more
right.
trouble than it's worth, so you tend to miss some opportunities.
hmm So yeah, it just definitely feels like there's things that are rewarded for at least in Human Revolution for a second playthrough, just so that you kind of like you've mapped the area now you know what you need to do to succeed really or to do really well at least going the second time. But it sounds like this is much more approachable and player friendly, at least going through this and making it more just making you feel like a true augmented hero, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agreed. That's one of the big draws of Mankind Divided for me so far.
Oh, awesome. So we got a little. It's easier on the player. How are the environments of the world compared to Human Revolution?
Right. So, I mean, the big draw of modern Deus Ex is that you've got um, not super big environments. That's never been the series' strength, but just the really dense environments.
Hmm
One thing that kind of caused me to fall in love with Human Revolution is that there's so many choices you can take or make and paths you can take through a level, whether it's stealth, through vents. You could even go stealth over rooftops. You could go combat through this hallway or that hallway. So you had all these choices, but at the end of the day, the levels weren't super large. In Mankind Divided, they are both much larger and much more dense, if that was even possible. There's not just multiple ways to and if you think about like a large cavernous sewer or like a large multi-leveled warehouse with conveyor belts and robots and all that kind of stuff, not only are there a ton of different ways you could sneak through that area or maneuver through that area, but even beyond that area at like a macro level, there's multiple points of entry to that place. There's multiple lanes of exit, and depending on the way that you exit, it might take you to a different section of the base than
hmm
another player would even see. So yeah, it's still I think in the Deus Ex spirit, like the city of Prague is where you spend most of your time, and it's split up into districts, and each of those districts is maybe, if you think, let's see, Human Revolution had two hub worlds that were decent sized, and each of the districts in Prague, excuse me, are maybe about the size or a little smaller than those hub worlds from Human Revolution. So all told, you're looking at a game that's about twice as large in land space, but then down at the micro level, those environments are just incredibly dense. So many little shortcuts, places where you could punch through a wall and gain access to a room that you can't get into because your hacking skill wasn't high enough at the other point of entry. It's just all those things sort of interlap, and there's verticality with the rooftops and windows you can get through. Reminds me a lot of Thief on PS4, which
Mm.
is no surprise. They're developed by the same studio. Thief was kind of Eidos Montreal's break in between the two Deus Ex games,
Ah, okay.
and Thief really impressed me when I reviewed it because it has these sort of dark, medieval, dingy cobblestone streets, and the amount of detail they packed not just onto the horizontal level where you move around, but also just vertically. It's like this dense web of rafters and rope swings and windows you can jump through, and it just made the whole thing feel very real. Like Deus
Hmm.
Ex Mankind Divided is totally the same way, and probably even more so.
Oh, well, excellent for that because I like the. Well, the first one was great, like for the reasons that you said about just having the some of the options, but basically having options in this one that can lead you to completely different areas or lead you down a
Yes.
different path is that's really cool to
There's
hear.
there's one level in particular. The other thing about Mankind Divided is that obviously not going into any of the specifics of the story, but you think about Human Revolution was all about this security operative named Adam Jensen who is augmented. We're in a future world where prosthetic limbs, prosthetic eyes, arms, and even, artificial body parts internally, or internal organs are, if not commonplace, they're becoming more so, and they've developed to a point where those who can afford them are reaping their benefits, like social implants that
Hmm.
allow them to talk more persuasively and gain an advantage in the workplace, eyeball enhancements to project a actual heads up display in their daily life to track information. So
Hmm.
it's creating this divide in society, and because of some events in the story, this security director, Adam Jensen, is granted a ton of them against his will. And throughout the game, he unravels a conspiracy and does all this stuff. By the end of it, it's a very like highbrow, classic science fiction story where this conspiracy is unraveled, and Jensen goes to progressively greater heights and like this scale of more dramatic moments on his way to unraveling it.
Hmm.
Mankind Divided is a lot more like about operations. He goes on missions. He has a director. He has a task force. He's part of this task force within Interpol. So there's a team. There's a cyber division. There's a counterterrorism division. There's a team psychiatrist who talks to the agents before they go out in the field. So, we were talking a little before the podcast. It reminds me of Splinter Cell a little bit in that way. Like, there's
Hmm.
this whole infrastructure supporting Adam Jensen from behind the scenes, and then you go out on these missions. So yeah, you leave Prague to go in these places, and one in particular, to talk about the way you can move through an environment. There's a trophy for, and I found this out later after completing this operation. There's a trophy for like discovering something fairly early in the level that allows you to skip basically the entire level. And it's a long level. Like it's a level that took me probably an hour and a half to sneak through,
Jeez.
and not get in any kind of hostile things. But yeah, I mean, just looking back through the trophies and reading the description, it's not clear what that thing is, but it basically says, you know, manipulate manipulate your surroundings to skip a large portion of the facility. You know what I mean? Like it,
Hmm.
it, it implies that there's this just crazy shortcut on top of all of the like all of the subtle ways your playthrough could be different out sneaking through that facility.
Oh, that's cool. Little
Yeah, yeah.
sneaky Easter eggs running through there. So,
Yeah, and that's
um,
kind of the way I play too.
hmm.
I like to think of myself as like the ghostly operative who there's a point at which I just say fuck it. Like it
Pretty much.
basically if it's too much trouble to go through completely undetected, and if
Hmm.
I'm having like if
Yeah.
I'm just repeatedly failing on like a certain save file, I'll just be like, well, sometimes a guy's got to die, you know?
Yeah,
Like
pretty much. Well, that was my same mentality talking about Splinter Cell. That's exactly how I play those games.
yeah, for sure. Like
Um, but
you're
that's what
just in my way.
yeah, well, that's what it sounded like. This game is far more, or stealth is far more encouraged in this than the past one. In part because you literally were unable to sneak or to get through the game without killing people in Human Revolution. Like the bosses, you had to kill them.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, that was one of people's common complaints with Human Revolution, and
Hmm.
I have yet to let me think, make sure. I have fought a boss in Mankind Divided, but it was on a side mission. So
Oh,
like at this point in the story, and like I told you, I've spent 30 hours playing Mankind Divided so far. I have yet to even encounter a boss. Like there's moments where it's like you meet a character that feels bossy, you know what I
hmm,
mean? Like you
hmm.
just meet someone and you're like, you're gonna be a boss at some point, I can tell. But that actually has yet to happen, and like the game is basically over. So I'm sure,
Huh.
well, I don't even want to say that. I don't want to say that I'm sure I'm gonna encounter one, but the reality is, without really knowing it, I might have circumvented a lot of possible boss fights. Because one thing I noticed in reading reviews is that some people had different experiences with that. Like Neil, who reviewed it for PSU, he was talking about the review while in the process, and he was like, "Guys, I haven't found like a single boss yet, and I feel like I'm not positive, but I might have talked myself out of a few boss fights." And then I've read other reviews
Huh.
where they specifically say, "Oh, the boss fight problem hasn't gone away from Human Revolution." So I think what's
Oh.
happening is that people just that's how much somebody's playthrough could deviate from another person's. Like you just
Sure.
flat out don't even have the same fights as other people might.
Okay, that's an interesting way to do it because my assumption was when they said you don't have to kill the bosses, it's like, oh, you can tranquilize them or whatever. That was like the automatic assumption. It'd be like Metal Gear
Oh, right.
Solid, like Snake
Yeah, or
Eater or
like
something. You
hack a
can
turret or something.
tranquilize the bosses instead of actually killing them, and that counts as a non-lethal victory or whatever. But just
Right.
completely avoiding the fight entirely because you can talk your way out of it. That's a really cool
Yes.
take to do that with, like, because bosses are something that you always feel is an unavoidable obstacle in a game. Like it has to happen or it's going to happen no matter what you do.
Yeah, and that's not the case here at all. And in
Hmm.
fact, like as I think back on my playthrough, I'm even like a little ambiguous on what those moments could have been, which is the
Hmm.
sign of just really great design. Because if
Yeah.
I can't even, like, I have a vague idea from one spot where that could have turned into a boss fight, but there are a couple others where like I remember having dramatic conversations with people where there's like a clear persuasion outcome.
Hmm.
And even if I had failed that, I don't think that would have caused a boss fight because like that person isn't really a bossy type or whatever. So like even I'm just kind of like, I don't even know if I've skipped them. I assume so because otherwise I would have had one by now.
Huh. Well, that's pretty crazy. So,
Yeah.
since we talked a little bit about, and we'll talk about the stealth anyway, how does the game play itself? Like,
Mhm.
how does it feel compared to, well, just to compared to other games? You talked about Thief, the other one that they created before this, but also Human Revolution
Right.
has been, what, 5 years?
Yeah,
So
it had
you
exactly 5 years. Yeah.
expect a
And
little bit of an improvement, I'd hope.
yeah, no, definitely. It's way past Human Revolution from like just a gameplay feel perspective.
Hmm.
It's true that sneaking, I feel, is definitely more incentivized than shooting, if only because to me, it just feels more rewarding to sneak. And if you're
Hmm.
going through like the world just, killing everything and going through ammo and stuff, the reality is that you'll probably see less of the game than a stealthy person would because you don't have the augments you would need
Sure.
to sneak into like this apartment complex or
Huh.
sneak into this section of a base. So, that's just kind of my take on it. That's why I tend to go towards sneaking because I feel like I'm seeing more of the game. But all across the board, I mean, it controls really well. Even as a shooter, like you can feel just the aiming and the cover system is a lot more responsive than in
Hmm.
Human Revolution. And one way that Mankind Divided actually kind of makes its mark on the genre is with a really polished cover system, where basically in my control setup, you tap L1 to take cover on whatever surface you're facing. So it's like
Hmm.
Rainbow Six Vegas or any other game kind of like that. And as you swivel the camera around and kind of look at different things, if you look at a piece of cover to the left of you, to the right of you, or in front of you, basically a dotted line will show where Jensen will run to if you press X. So what you can do by doing that is like aim at the next piece of cover, hit X, and he'll kind of do like a combat, not like a dive, but like he'll kind of
Hmm.
shimmy out of cover quick and like keep his head low while he shuffles to the next piece of cover. And you can do that in like any direction, like sort of behind you, off to the side, like diagonally up in front of you. He can like just sticky cover to all these different things without you having to like pop up. So it's like very smooth
Hmm.
and just feels really purposeful, like makes you feel like Jensen is kind of the skilled, decisive operative that he is. And that's something that, I mean, I actually went back and played Human Revolution a little bit after Mankind Divided crashed on me. And, just going back to where you have L1 to go to cover and that's it. Like there's nothing else. It just felt
Hmm.
so awkward and stilted after
Hmm.
playing Mankind Divided, but so many games are like that. So it's totally like a positive thing that they've added to the genre. I hope more games kind of follow suit with
Interesting.
that.
I was gonna bring that up too about the cover system because I mean, at least to me, jumping into it, I think I was coming. Was that? I'm trying to think of when Uncharted came out before that, before E3. So I think
Oh yeah, yeah.
I was coming off of that. I think like trying to take cover that way, or like more traditional games where you just press a button and you stick to it or whatever,
Yeah, and
and
you
trying
hit
to move
X and it
around. And it
falls
just like
over.
I felt really clunky at first, trying to
I,
get
I
used
think
to it.
it's different. Yeah, I totally I could see how a demo would
Yeah.
would reinforce that because it didn't. it took like an hour or so before I really kind of fell in love with it. And like I
Hmm.
don't even know that it's the right kind of cover system for a game like Uncharted, which kind of, it's kind of that free-flowing
Right.
adventure
No, I'm
and
not saying it should
it,
have been in that, but yeah, it was just like, well, also even probably that day it was coming off of like, I don't know, a half a dozen or more other games that just playing,
Mhm.
and it felt like there was a learning curve to the game a little bit more than at least the other games that I was playing that day, and it just kind of
Yeah.
threw me off. So I was like, not that it's a dig at it, but it just seemed like that was something that could be you will have to take some time to really. You can't just jump right into this like other games, which could be a good thing, I think,
Yeah, I
and
think
just like
there's a
naturally
bit of a
fall into
wall
it.
there. Yeah, you do need to be ready to make the investment, I think, 'cause it's not a short game either.
Yeah.
And if you just try to blitz through just playing the story missions, which is what's nice about this is that I think they're better marked, like what's a story mission and what's a side mission. Like in Human Revolution, I remember that being kind of muddy, and I would tend to forget what I was doing in an area. But here it's
Mm-hmm.
like literally the difference between like a yellow objective marker and a blue one, and
Yeah.
you can decide which one you want to track. So yeah, there's and if you were to just blitz through the main missions, you would be kind of short on praxis points. You gain experience for doing things, and when you level up, you get a new point
Mm-hmm.
to spend on augmentation. So if you're just blitzing through it, I feel like your character would be kind of underdeveloped. So it's definitely a game that you need to be ready to invest some time in, which
Mm-hmm.
any RPG fan already
Well,
kind of
sure.
knows that and is
Yeah.
ready to do that.
Well, that's the thing with this is that it blends the line so much in terms of just like a actiony shooter and RPG type of thing that it's just like
Mhm.
I'm trying to think of that. Maybe it was the day before. I'm trying to think of what I was thinking of like a game like Titanfall or something like that, or it's just like, oh, it's a shooter, you jump into it, and you play, and just kind of like basic. All the controls are generally the same. You can go on and just like run
Yeah,
into
and
it, and it's like this game is kind of deceiving that way in a good way, where it's like, oh, there's a set of rules in this world, and I have to learn them before I can just like become awesome,
yeah,
type
totally.
of
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. And then it just like gets easier as you go along. Like it's just funny how I went back and started a new file and I played that first mission again and I just moved through it so quickly and I remember
Mm,
just it felt really awkward when I first dove in. So it's definitely, yeah, there's a great feeling of reward that sort of unwraps as you go through it.
that's great. That's like really cool to hear. So one of the I think the other big thing that we didn't talk about yet was like, so there's the stealth, there's the gameplay, there's the environments, hacking. I think we've mentioned that before.
Hmm.
How does hacking fare in this game versus the last one? Because I know the last one, I think I got to try a little bit of hacking in the demo, if I remember correctly. But at least the
Yeah, you're
last one, it
probably
was just
forced to.
yeah, like the last in Human Revolution, it was like what was it? You'd have like these little checkpoint things, or like a screen would come up, and you'd like hold a circle around, or hold a button on something, and then it would hack that. And you'd move on, and you try to build up defenses as you go, or whatever. And there were a couple different hacking modes, weren't there, or different
I think
methods of getting through?
the kind of main thing was where, yeah, basically how you describe, like there's a grid of nodes and it's different for every computer or every keypad and what
Mm-hmm.
have you. And every node that you capture has a built-in chance of failure. And if you fail, the alarm node, wherever it is on the grid, goes off and tries to chase you down. And you basically have if you happen to fail that dice roll,
Mm-hmm.
you've then got like 10 seconds to get through to the end, or 15 seconds, or maybe just 5 seconds. So that's identical. Like that's literally in every respect the same. They have added a couple wrinkles where like there are now traps on the hacking grid. So
Oh.
and to back up a little bit for the uninitiated, you that is kind of a pillar of the game where it's like, yeah, sneaking is great and everything. You can crawl through air ducts, you can stick to cover and kind of work your way through rooms undetected. But a big part of that is that you can also use hacking to both gain information, like you hack someone's email and the email says something about a route that you might take to infiltrate the next building. Or you could hack a keypad to open a door that's locked. You might find a weapon in there, some loot. Or you could hack a turret and turn it against the enemies, or a drone, or turn it against the enemies. So yeah, there's all those kind of outcomes. But a few wrinkles they've added with the grid in this, there's traps on the line. So if you try to move to a new node and capture it, a trap might go off along the way that just sets off the alarm instantly, and you can't see it until it happens to you.
Mm.
But
Mm-hmm.
to counter that, you can pick up items in the environments like little pieces of software. So I might have like a reveal software, and if I use it, all of the traps on the grid will become visible, so I know which way to go around them. Or you might have a stealth software where you activate it, and the next node that you capture, it's impossible for you to be detected. Like there's a 0% chance of failure. So you
Mm-hmm.
can kind of strategically use these softwares to outsmart grids that are maybe a little above your level. Like if you're taking on a level 4 security system and you just unlocked that ability, chances are you might like say your chance of detection still sucks because you haven't put points into upgrading that. You can use these softwares to sort of say, okay, I've got this level 5 node. It's going to be really hard to capture. I'm going to use a stealth software to just instantly, okay, that's safe. I'm past that point.
Mm.
Now I can go get some other ones. So it's a little bit deeper, not terribly so. I think it's a little harder in general, but I'm also finding that it's almost. I really feel like a lot of these things are kind of necessary. Like the systems in Mankind Divided, they're stronger than ever. You know, shooting is more capable than ever. The controls are better. Sneaking, you've got the advanced cover system to make it kind of more sophisticated. But I think more than ever, if you plan to be a stealthy character, it's not enough to just invest in like your invisibility cloak or your silenced footsteps, because a lot of the times you'll go along that kind of sneaky pathway and you'll run up against a box that you have to move or a computer that blocks your progress. So then you'll need
Mm-hmm.
hacking skills to just be
Sure.
that stealthy player. So I think those systems intertwine with each other a bit better, which does help push you into some upgrade trees that you might not otherwise considered. Like the game is sort of gently saying, "Hey, maybe you should put points into this next time," without ever really like shoving you into
Oh,
that
okay.
bucket, forcing you.
Sure. Well, one thing that it did that you mentioned before that did kind of force you was to stop playing the game. At least a couple times, isn't it? It happened twice for
Yeah,
you. So there
so
there are some glitches. I think
uh,
there's some broad hiccups and glitches that happen throughout kind of everybody's experience, like graphical hiccups and things like that that aren't that major, but there are reports that you've experienced and other people did experience. They've patched a couple
yeah,
of things
yes.
at this point, but I'll let you
Well, it's
explain
yeah, it's kind of
what
right. It's kind
happened
of
to
all over
you,
the board.
your life in Deus Ex.
I'll say this for all intents and purposes, the PS4 version is like really. I hate to say really polished, because then you hit a bunch of this game breaking crap. But like I had zero problems. Well, that's not true. I have a couple funny stories. All right, so 10 hours into the game, I've had no problems. Right, it's been
Mm-hmm.
smooth sailing. The frame rate's great. It's a 1080p constant on PS4. It's only 900p on Xbox One, which that's far from that's like the trend now, basically.
Ah.
Um, so like 10 hours in, there's like this bank that I'm invading, or invading. So I'm infiltrating a bank, like leading an army of augmented against this corporate bank. But no, so it's like a cyber bank. So basically, rather than having vaults, they have secure servers that are
Mm-hmm.
physically locked below the bank. But I'm literally just infiltrating it for the hell of it. I don't have a mission. I don't have any purpose to be there. I just walked into the bank and then saw an air vent, and I was like, all right, game on. Let's see what we can plumb from this place. And I ended up spending like 2.5 hours in there, just free roaming. It was great. But toward the end, I basically finished my sneaking, and like as best I can tell, I've explored all the routes that are kind of available to me, stolen a bunch of stuff, earned some credits. I come back out into the main lobby where before there were civilians, guards, just everyone kind of milling about. I come out into there and it's empty. There's not a single soul on this massive main lobby. And I'm looking around and I'm like, okay, is it closed? Like I don't like what the heck's going on with this. As I walk around that main lobby, I can hear voice files from the guards and the NPCs talking, but their bodies aren't there.
They're
So like I'll just be walking,
ghosts.
yeah, and I'll suddenly hear a voice that's like, "Hey, you shouldn't be here." I'm like, "Oh, Jesus, like, where's it coming from?" And then I would try to walk down some hallways and stuff, and like I don't know if like basically a lot of times when you approach a guard, the screen will cut to black and then instantly come up, and it's like the conversation camera angle. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That would happen. Like the screen would cut to black as if it was going to do that, and then when it would come up, the camera would be like pointed at a wall or like pointed at the floor, like something just random, and then it would just be basically be frozen. I'd have to reload my save. So it got kind of
Huh.
janky. I eventually made it out of the bank to find out that every policeman in the city of Prague was hostile to me.
Oh, okay.
It's the
Well, you did invade the bank, so.
I did, but it's just like where did everybody go? So like I had to luckily I had a mission within that district of the city, but like I had to sneak through, 10 or 11 blocks of the city to just sneak past all these cops out in the open to just get to my next mission and be able to progress through the game. So that was kind of fun. And then it was all smooth sailing. It was all totally fine. And the game's got kind of shitty lip syncing, and the
Yeah, that
frame
was some
rate.
of Neil's thing was that the facial animation is still kind of wonky in this. That like, not that it's like game breaking. It's just like something that you have to just kind of get used to over a while and you forget about it.
Yeah,
But then they said there was a Miller, some main character that was like he said it was always just noticeably bad.
there's a couple that are, yeah, Miller, yeah, I can see I can see why he said that. Yeah, and that sucks too because that was a problem in Human Revolution, and like by and large, Mankind Divided is a phenomenal looking game. It's definitely one of the best looking PS4 games, and it's just like doing really interesting things with lighting and bloom lighting, and Jensen's face is very very meticulously animated and detailed, but then yeah, it'll like cut from him to, which is like movie quality animation, to somebody who's just flailing their arms around and their lips are kind of flapping on and off, and it's just, yeah, totally. So yeah, it's not a perfect technical package, but by and large, it was very smooth and the game looked great. And then I get to pretty late in the game, like 30 hours in, and it just crashes during a loading screen. So I'm like, well, that's not good. Reload my save, and it crashes again in the exact same spot about 8 seconds into this loading screen, going to an area that I have to go to progress through the mission. So, okay, the first time was whatever, it happens. I actually can't think of a blockbuster PS4 game I've played this year where it didn't crash once, so
Huh.
it didn't raise a red flag for me.
Yeah.
But like second time where it happened at the exact same moment, I'm like, okay, this just reeks of save file corruption. But
Mm-hmm.
so what I did is I reloaded a previous autosave because it keeps like your most recent two or three,
Sure.
I
Yep.
think. Went back a little bit. I'm like, okay, maybe something I did between then and now fucked with my game save. It's having trouble processing what an NPC is doing, or I was basically running through like my Skyrim list of priorities, like
Yeah.
what could be breaking the game right now. Let's
Yeah.
try to run through a process of elimination. So that didn't work. Third time it crashed, and now I'm at the point where it's like, well, let's try some stuff. So I tried taking, this is a train loading screen, like you travel by train and then it
Ah.
loads for a bit. I tried taking the train to another district and then go to the district I want to go to.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't work. Tried a few others. I bounced around between a few of them, trying to like, I don't know, shake up the game's memory or something. I don't really know. None of that worked. I did a clean install of the game and then re-downloaded my save files from PlayStation Plus. That didn't work. So I was at an impasse. I'm like, well, this sucks because I'm at this point now where I've put so much time into the game that I basically, it really, really sucks to have to restart the game, but I have enjoyed my time with the game so much that I was actually willing to do that, except on PS4, I had no guarantee that the same thing wouldn't happen to me again.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually went and bought the PC version. I'm playing that now instead. So I think if nothing else, the game breaking stuff that I've seen, it's really a testament to how good the game is that I'm like still seeking ways to get around that. Like it's not like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
just gonna sit here and wait for them to patch out that PS4 crash. I'm like, all right, how else can I play? Like what's my way around that?
Yeah. But you still
That
had some trouble
Yeah,
trying to
yeah,
play it.
PC wasn't perfect either. There's this glitch that a lot of people are having where there's a cutscene early in the game that's kind of a long 2 minute thing that you can't skip, and it was crashing for people in the exact same spot. And that happened to me too. So then I'm like, Jesus Christ, I just can't catch a break here. So I went online, went on Reddit and stuff like that. I found a thread where people had some suggestions, and there was a thread on the Eidos forums where they said we're aware of it. Try these things. So what I did is I cranked everything down to low, put the game in 720p, and then put it in windowed mode, and that allowed me to. Oh, I also had to turn off subtitles.
Oh, of course.
So all four of those things, but it should be noted, not any one of those things worked because I tried them individually,
Uh,
but all four of them at the same time allowed me to pass through that cutscene unscathed.
oh my God. I want to know how somebody even figured that out in the first place.
Oh, right, like that thing
Yeah.
enables you to get past it. I have no idea. I have no idea whatsoever. But I mean, maybe I just, if nothing else, what I've seen from a lot of these releases on Steam in recent months is that you get such a high volume of players right off the bat that unfortunately so many of them end up being beta testers, but you just have so many of them that the solutions become apparent really quickly.
Hmm.
But at the same time, it boggles my mind that something so, I don't want to say so persistent, but like about half of the user reviews on Steam are negative, and
Hmm.
most of those negative reviews are for this issue.
Yeah.
So it's like, how does that go missed in the QA
Hmm.
process is what I know. And it sucks because it's like, yeah, this is something. I don't mean that it sucks as like for me as a gamer, because oh, this fucking sucks, my game doesn't work. I mean, totally, that's a thing.
Hmm.
But it more sucks because like this team pours 4 years of their lives crafting a sequel that they feel is worthy to the original,
Hmm.
and it's like tripping at the finish line, you know? It's like
Yeah.
you allowed a quality control oversight or just not enough time in the oven to basically mar the launch, and you can't take that back. Like the game might end up selling really well, and like Human Revolution before, it'll probably have a pretty good legacy, but you know your launch is forever kind of ruined by the fact that if not the majority, at least a very sizable chunk of people like just couldn't progress past the game. And I'm sure like with Steam, a lot of them probably just requested refunds after like an hour of trying. They're like, you know, screw this. Why would I bother
Hmm.
wasting my time on a game that they couldn't be bothered to fix? So it sucks. But
Yeah.
at least for our listeners who are probably heavily PlayStation centric, like my time on PS4 has been a whole lot of great with just two kind of unfortunate incidents. But I mean, you can ask Neil as well. He didn't encounter either of those things, and he's on his second playthrough of the game now. So I think that stuff's a lot more isolated on console. It's like oddly the console version seems to be the good one this time around.
Cool. Yeah, that is pretty
Strange.
strange.
So
Um,
you didn't get super into Human Revolution though, from
no,
what I
I liked it a
remember.
lot.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, no, I liked it a lot. I just didn't have any interest in going back and playing it much. I think I tried to play it a second time once, and I just got bored with it.
I remember you were super into like the trailers and
Oh
like
my
the Adam
God. Yeah,
Jensen kind of.
the aesthetic of the game itself, and just the very first trailer where he ran towards the wall and punched through and broke the guy's neck was like, I'm totally sold on this game.
This is happening.
I'm buying this game. That's
What's
like,
kind of interesting about the aesthetic of Mankind Divided is that there are traces of like that technological renaissance that
hmm.
Human Revolution portrays, but it's 2 years later, so now it's like a destroyed renaissance. Because now, in the wake of the events of Human Revolution, there's this deep, deep distrust of anybody
Sure.
who's augmented. So the kind of golden, glistening structures that you had in Human Revolution, that kind of polished, sort of gilded sci-fi aesthetic, that's now sort of giving way to like steam and metal and neighborhoods that have become kind of dilapidated. And there's these
Hmm.
ghettos where augmented people are being sort of cordoned off while society figures out how to ease tensions between the two, sectors. There's
Sure.
a lot of the crux of the politics in this game centers around something called the Human Restoration Act, where it hasn't at the time of the game it hasn't passed through like the United Nations yet. It's kind of in discussions, but basically in the 2 years since Human Revolution, basically shit goes down at the end of Human Revolution, and the world doesn't trust Augs anymore. It's this horrible, horrible incident. Um, and the distrust has just been growing. You've got these neighborhoods where they're just like the police are just exercising just wanton brutality and recklessness against augmented people.
Mm-hmm.
We're literally calling them Augs and Naturals. Naturals being the rest of humankind.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Human Restoration Act is trying to propose, well, let's put all of the augmented people in one city and basically let's give humanity a timeout. It's like a temporary measure,
Mm-hmm.
like a let's separate the two groups and just try to figure out a plan to ease tensions and come together.
What
Like,
could go wrong?
right, it's just a very flimsy excuse for this authoritarian
Internment
segregation.
camps for augmented people.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That's kind of the point that
Mm-hmm.
I've come to. And even as Adam Jensen, you occasionally just get randomly stopped by police officers who demand to see your ID, and you have to like sit through this cutscene, which has the funny thing of it's annoying because you're like, oh, come on, I'm just trying to run to my objective, but that's kind of the point, right?
Yeah,
You're getting
really.
stopped. It's like it forcibly interrupts you for like 30 seconds while they check his paperwork.
Well, that's cool. I like that they throw that dose of reality really just kind of in there.
Yeah, and it's like a lot of things. I don't even call myself a Deus Ex fan in particular because I've never completed the first or second game. The
Mm-hmm.
first game, of course, is the one that everyone sings the praises of.
God, it's
I'm more
also
just like a
hard as shit to play.
yeah. It hasn't in my even as somebody who didn't play it back in the day. I'm assuming it doesn't hold up well
It's
from what I
it's
played.
awful.
I'm like,
I mean, in
yeah.
terms of it, not that I mean, if trying to go back to it now, it's like it's just almost unbearable to try to play through that from what you think should happen in the game.
Yeah, yeah, and how
It,
it should control,
yeah,
and
it's totally counterintuitive if you've
I
played
think it
modern games.
I think I'm just an Adam Jensen fan at the end of the day,
Yeah,
you
I
know?
like him a
Like I'm a
lot.
fan of these two games and like the world that they portray and his character in particular because I think that just Eidos Montreal, if nothing else, they just kill it at world building. Like I'm thinking of this there's these aug ghettos, right? Like they've already kind of started placing the augmented in like mechanical sort of cities where they're just sort of we're going to put you here in temporary confinement. You can live among your kind while we figure out what to do with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got these really just jaw-dropping sort of sci-fi architectures and visuals. Like it's this city of like uh, hundreds upon hundreds of floors in this mechanical box. And in the tight-knit corridors of the city, you're just surrounded by like steel walls and these little capsules that serve as people's houses, and there's like what seems like thousands of wires running crisscross above you, providing just janky electricity to all these different light structures, and it feels claustrophobic, like you're being sucked in by these tight spaces, and then all of a sudden you look over to your right and there's like a rubbery, like a colorful kids mat, like where you fit those jigsaw pieces together and
Mm-hmm.
you've got like sort of a play mat, like that's just sort of sitting out on like this basically this steel shipping container that serves as
Mm-hmm.
their backyard,
Yeah.
and it's like a children's daycare is just a hollowed out shipping container with like a logo crudely assembled with neon lights, and then there's like a matron in there or a caretaker just sort of like crying or sitting somberly on her couch.
Jeez. That
And
does
I
sound
mean,
like yeah.
so it's just so compelling because it gets you, I mean, it gets you thinking, like any good sci-fi, it gets you thinking about what the logical extremes of some of our current societal tensions are, and then it sets those against a futuristic backdrop. It makes it a little easier to examine some things going on in our own world when you can view that in 2029. And it shows, you know, maybe if the world continues like this is what it could look like, and if
Yeah.
it does end up looking like that, what would you do given some of these choices? Like try to spell out your own moral compass within the trappings of this near future world.
Mm-hmm. That's actually something what would you do is that's something we didn't really talk about much too is like the range of like dialogue choice and the consequences for actions that are taken and the conversations you have. Like one you said that you basically seems like you can avoid boss fights entirely, but
Hmm.
how do the are the choices that you're given realistic to you, or choices that you could see yourself making depending on how you felt? And do the responses seem realistic
Sure.
in kind?
It's tough because so many games, like where you're presented with these choices, you think of something like The Witcher or Skyrim, it's like
Mm-hmm.
you're presented with fairly simple moral dilemmas, like do you turn in the thief to the guards or do you let him run away, that kind of thing. With Deus Ex, it puts your choices in like these sort of complicated political situations and these complicated like Jensen is a task force operative, so by definition he's a police member, but he's in a world where like the police are treating the augmented very harshly. So it's like, does he care? Is he just there to pursue his mission? I think in general, the possible responses that it gives you, they do a good job of fleshing out these different Jensens. So like there's cynical Jensen who's there to do the mission, and you know, maybe he sees a lot of these societal ills as unfortunate, but he doesn't view it as his job to fix them.
Mm.
Then there's altruistic Jensen, who is just the yes man, says yes to everyone, and always does like the right thing for individual people. And
Sure.
then you can kind of play like the cold calculating. Like, for example, you might come across an augmented woman who's trying to smuggle her own way out of the city to find greener pastures. So she's working with the local crime family to help smuggle her past the borders. Well, you might come upon her and it's kind of up to you to decide, you know technically you're breaking the law and technically I'm an officer, and like by these types of rules maybe there's a benefit to me turning you in, like there might be a reward for doing that, or my superiors might commend me for being a rule follower. But
Mm.
obviously the moral thing to do, I think the kind thing to do, is to help facilitate her escape from the city. So yeah, I guess in that sense, the options are plenty varied, and I never feel like I don't like any of them. Like more often, there's two that are fairly similar, and I kind of have to. Thankfully, it shows you exactly what Jensen's going to say next, like the full two
Mm.
sentences or the full whatever.
That's good.
So
Yeah, that was going to be one of my
yeah, that's
follow-ups because
huge.
that's what I hated in Fallout 4.
Yeah.
The
Oh, for sure, for
responses, I
sure.
was just like, that is not that's not at all what I was expecting you to
Yeah,
do.
Fallout was really bad with that, like worse than other games about
Yeah.
like misleading you.
And even
Yeah,
just
this is
the tone of voice that he would use sometimes, it was like, I'd expect you to say that sentence, but not that way.
not this way.
Yeah.
Not like this.
Right.
It's yeah, it's just really fortunate here because those situations, like I said, are a little more complex and a little more nuanced. So you really do need like the full Jensen sentence to really
Mm.
appreciate like the difference between those choices. So yeah, it really hits the mark on that front. I think it works within the confines of who Jensen is. Like I said, you've got this altruistic Jensen, this cynical Jensen, and this cold, brutal Jensen, and those are kind of the three. Very roughly speaking, because they do shuffle. It does.
Hmm.
I gotta give credit to the writing because it does like it's never like a Mass Effect thing where you go into a conversation and like you already know instinctively like what the left option will be and what the right
Sure.
option will be. It's more like I literally find myself reading the full explanation for all three of those choices every time because I'm never sure what his response could be.
Mm.
But then if you look at the big picture over time, it does kind of meld in some directions, but it's hard to predict in
Hmm.
in the moment.
No. All right. Well, one thing though, leading into the choices obviously are going to change how the story is experienced to a degree. But I know you haven't gotten to the end of the game yet, but some of the stuff that's been popping up for their responses for that is that it sounds like it ends pretty abruptly and not satisfyingly.
Hmm.
It sounds like
Yeah,
it's
I've
really just kind
seen.
of leaves it. I'm trying to find what Neil had said about that. Basically, that it just kind of that leaves a sour taste, and that it just ends. What is it? It's Some genuinely surprising revelations are marred by the sensation of being cheated out of immediate closure somewhat.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
and,
So
and I've heard that same sentiment from a couple other places as well.
I think what I'm finding, honestly, if I was gonna point to any negative about the game whatsoever, I'm besides, it's got a few of the little quirks where it's like the AI, maybe they saw me great, but then okay, you just saw me. How does the 8 people in a block radius around us know that I'm here? You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
those kind of things. So there's those quirks, but really my only major complaint with the game stems with how the story. And maybe it's because I'm comparing it to Human Revolution, where there was a lot of globetrotting. Like you had these pivotal events that caused you to go from Detroit to Shanghai, and then from Shanghai to Tai Young Medical, like seeking your way through this hospital to try to apprehend its CEO and demand an explanation from her. And then you go to Singapore and you go to Panchaea, this global warming like mechanical cure out in the middle of the ocean.
Hmm.
So it had such a globe-trotting like narrative arc, and like that's I think that's what I mean when I say that Mankind Divided feels really flat. Like the
Hmm.
major beats of the story aren't really changing all that much. Like my goal hasn't seemed to change much since the beginning of the game, and maybe partly because there hasn't been any boss fights for me, but like I still am not sure about if there's a clear villain. I mean, there's a guy that it points to really heavily as a villain, but he doesn't feel like an important kind of villain like
Hmm.
the Illuminati did in the previous game.
Sure.
So yeah, it's hard to get a read on. I do feel like I'm coming up on the end of the game. I'll find out as soon as they patch that. But and so even for me, where it feels kind of flat and unresolved, if they were to just drop the story like an hour from now or like 2 hours from my point in the game, I could totally see it being like a okay, well, there's literally no closure. Like nothing satisfactory happened.
Hmm.
We didn't go and reveal more of this conspiracy that Jensen is chasing. So I'm a little worried about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's setting up too much for a follow-up game, that they really are leaving it open on intentionally so that you'll be basically just want to know what happens, and not really in the way of like, oh, I can't believe that happened, I need to know what happens next. It's like, well, you didn't tell me anything, so I need to play this game so I can find
Yeah,
out.
it really is a shame because I think like, not that Eidos ever said this, people just maybe assumed it or hoped for it, but we are expecting them to connect these prequel dots back to the original game at some point. And
Mm.
there was a very real chance that Mankind Divided could have been that game, like the one that has the stakes just get higher and higher and the conspiracy finally unravels and then it sets in motion the events that lead to the original Deus Ex. But I explicitly saw one review that said no, that doesn't happen. Like there's a huge gulf in time still. There's a lot of unanswered questions, and so yeah, I guess as a fan of these games, I'm stoked because that means that most likely this is going to be a prequel trilogy, and
Hmm.
there will ultimately be a third game that brings us back to brings us full circle. And who knows, maybe they would even embark on doing like a full remake slash reboot of the original game on like next gen hardware or something, right? Like
That'd be
maybe
pretty
five,
cool.
6 years from now. That'd be sick. Yeah,
Hmm.
I'd finally play it, or finish it anyway. So yeah, but it is unfortunate because that's not good. The very best stories find ways to add closure while I'm even cool with cliffhangers if the events of the game that had the most dramatic stakes in them, if those find closure within the context of the game, sure, you can leave doors open at the end or show me a scene that you don't explain.
Hmm.
That just whets your appetite, but it
Yeah,
seems like they don't do that at all.
best cliffhanger Resistance 2.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great example though. Resistance 2, like the story, if I remember correctly, it has been a while. The story of Resistance 2, at least the things that you fight and
Well,
the
it
places you
completely
go,
ended
like
because your character got shot himself in the head or whatever. Got shot. I was like,
yeah.
what the hell? And then you see these planets behind him that just appeared. And you're like, we're on Earth, right? And it's like, nope, end of the game. I was like, oh my god. And then the
If
third
I
game came out and it sucked. The story sucked anyway. Ugh.
Yeah, no, the gameplay was the third game's strength to me,
Mm,
not the story. Yeah, so totally though. I think like Mankind Divided is an improvement over Human Revolution in almost every way. The only way that it isn't is in the story. But even then, I'm still invested in Adam Jensen, and I still really care about the people that he's talking to, the places he's going. It's not as much of a classic, memorable sci-fi story as Human Revolution was, because it's missing that
mm.
sort of narrative build-up and the conspiracy unraveling. Like those elements are missing, so it's mostly just a serviceable story with these amazing gameplay elements and stealth elements around it.
Sure. And gameplay is the all important factor in a game. So, and it sounds like it's
Yes.
carried it extremely well so far in reviews that we've seen.
Yeah, I have to, and I, kudos to Neil for his review. It was a great read. And I'm honestly, it read like a review that it read like my review. You know what I mean? Like if I'd have written
Mm-hmm.
it, I'm like, okay, that's yes, 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 yes,
Mm-hmm.
9 out of 10. Okay, nothing
Mm-hmm.
to see here. Moving on.
Yeah.
I'm right there with him though. I think it is. I'm at a 9 out of 10 personally right now. The game breaking crashes didn't help, but I really try to not like look at that. Man, it would have really sucked if that had happened to my copy and I had the review assignment on my plate.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's just like, what do you do? Like,
Yeah, because
we
there's
wouldn't
nothing.
have been
Yeah.
able to publish time. But yeah, no, it's highly, highly recommended. On my scale of PS3 games, I would actually put it above Bloodborne. So it's kind of
PS4
my
games.
third PS4 games. Yeah, sorry. I would put it above Bloodborne, so it's my third favorite PS4 game behind Uncharted and The Witcher.
Hmm. That's that's a pretty good testimony there.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I'm excited to check it out eventually too. I'm really looking forward to jumping back with Jensen, run around, beat people up, all that fun stuff. Punch
Reach,
through
punch.
walls, break
Yes,
people's
yeah, that's
necks.
still there. Have no fear. Oh, I do want to say quick, the augmentations, there's new ones in this game.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's I was gonna say to bring that up before we didn't talk about.
yeah, for sure. So you've got returning classics, like you can punch through walls, and like a lot of those play into the sneaking system. So like having the ability to crush through a weakened structure might open a path for you that circumvents a room full of enemies or gets you to a side mission you might not have even seen otherwise. So you've got kind of those standard things. There's like the Icarus landing to prevent fall damage. You can upgrade his lungs to be able to breathe gas safely. But then, so the story setup for his augmentations being reset is that he goes into a clinic to fix some bugs he's having. And in the process of fixing him up, the doctor finds a whole bunch of hidden augmentations within Jensen's firmware that he didn't even realize were there. And that kind of becomes a plot point because he goes in basically the question is why did I not know about these before? And it's
Mm.
implied that maybe after the events of Human Revolution, there's a couple months there that Jensen doesn't remember. Maybe these were added to him by somebody or something. So you kind of gets into the story of that, but basically in the process of screwing up Adam's firmware, he the doctor discovers these experimental augmentations, and then as you unlock them, it kind of has parallels with computers. It's considered to be
I was
overclocking
gonna say
Adam's firmware. Yeah, so he actually gets unstable if you have too many of those experimental augmentations where your HUD starts
huh.
to glitch. Like your ammo readout might just say NA instead of your actual ammo. Your radar might stop working for a few seconds because you're overheating having too many of these installed.
That's
But you can,
cool.
all right, yeah, that's an awesome, awesome wrinkle because they're considered to be like I don't necessarily agree that all of the experimentals are like better than the normal ones, but there
Mm-hmm.
are a couple where you're just like, that's freaking awesome. Like one of them is the ability to shoot metal blades from his arm,
Oh
which
yeah.
you see in trailers and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Another is like basically the blink power from Dishonored, where you like dash forward,
Mm.
like teleport basically to a point above you or whatever. And then there's one that just slows time to a crawl, so you can kind of move through a room, clearing out guys with no problem. But yeah, you can to offset the fact that those overheat your firmware, you can permanently disable other augmentations on the tree. And so
Huh.
like if the like if the reflex booster augment brings you to 150% power, you're like 50% over stable. You can disable something else permanently to bring yourself back down to 100 where you don't have any glitches anymore. But if you want to push yourself and unlock those experimental augments and just kind of deal with the consequences, you totally can. Like I got my instability up to 250% at one point, and like basically every couple minutes the HUD would spaz out, and it was actually getting to the point where it was kind of messing with me because I forget what it is, but there was some ability where I'd be using it. Oh, like for example, if you're sneaking through a room and you've got the invisible shield applied,
Mm-hmm.
and your HUD flips out, you just lose it. You know what I mean? Like you're bad. So you could be in a room full of enemies, just appear in front of them because your HUD just unpredictably spazzed out, and when it does that, if it's in the process of spazzing out, you can't use any power. So I can't teleport forward. I can't like bring up my armor to prepare for a firefight. I can't even
Mm.
see the amount of ammo I have. And it might flip off 5 seconds later, but you never know. That's the whole point. It's kind of totally unpredictable.
Mm. I like that a lot.
Very, very cool though. Yeah, there's a lot of cool. The experimental augs are a lot of fun. You can shoot electric charges from your wrist if you're going for a non-lethal playthrough. Instead of the nano blades, you might want to shoot some electric charges so that it just incapacitates a guard. Or there's the reflex booster I've mentioned. There's a Titan aug that makes you invincible temporarily, like just
Mm.
envelops Adam in like this foreign element that just covers his body.
I remember that in the
So
trailer.
yeah, for sure, they make a big point out of that, which is obviously awesome if you're a combat player, but also if you're a stealth player, as far as I can tell, that's like the only augment that really counteracts like electricity. Like if you're moving through an electrified pool of water or an electrified air vent, you can kind of dash through it and sort of keep yourself alive by chugging stim packs. But if you have this augment for a Titan shield, you can just walk right through it.
Jeez.
That's the real power. Yeah, that's the real power of the game is just how all those different systems
Mm-hmm.
interact. And it's even though it's compared to other RPGs, I mean, just the amount of abilities and stuff. It's light if you were to compare it to something like The Witcher. It's certainly not as big or as robust of an RPG. But the nice thing about
Mm-hmm.
Deus Ex is that everything feels meaningful, and in some ways I almost prefer that kind of smaller focus because when all these systems overlap with each other, you've like there's no augment that's just terrible and you would never pick up, unlike some RPGs where there's fluff like items you never use and spells you never use.
Yep. That. I would agree with that. Right now, anyway, for me, I would definitely like it. That sounds like a good game to have come up right now, where it's more streamlined and focused, but still delivers a really wholesome experience.
Yeah, a nice palate cleanser for sure. I mean, bigger, bigger, bigger is kind of the whole thing these
Yeah,
days.
completely. What was it? Well, it was like, well, there's randomly generated and there's open world. Those are like the buzzwords of the game universe right now, and I'm getting really tired of that at this
Yeah,
point.
there's for sure, and as the contrast to that, I forget. There's a great phrase that somebody had coined for Deus Ex in a preview or something, and I loved the way they described it. But it's like if you take a linear game, you could picture your game as like a series of tubes. Like you move through a tube from the beginning of the game to the end point, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy 13 kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
um, Deus Ex, rather than being an open world where you've just got this big circle that you can just do anything within, Deus Ex is just a really, really big tube, like a really,
Mm-hmm.
really wide tube, where the endpoint's the same for everyone, your objectives are the same. It's just your play space is so dense and so interesting on the way there, that you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get some open world exploration, and like it takes I mean, like I've been saying, it takes 30, 40, even 50 hours to see everything in the game, but like it's never like you totally lose focus,
Mm-hmm.
which is great.
Sweet. All right. Well, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. And you guys can check out Deus Ex Mankind Divided right now because it came out earlier this week.
Yeah, or on Tuesday.
Yeah, so be sure to check it out. Let us know what you think of the game once you get a chance to play it. Uh, s- Let us know if there's any game crashes that you have or any kind of glitches. I'd be interested to know if they've fixed any of that stuff.
And then go on the Eidos forums and post them so that they pay more attention to mine.
Right, yeah, so that Kyle can
Find
finish
my
the
thread
game.
and add your, hey, this is happening to me too.
Yeah, well, this has been episode 38 of PlayStation Fix. Be sure to leave a review for us on iTunes. You can find us on there, on SoundCloud. We're also available. We'll be up on PS YouTube, our YouTube channel. You can also check out PSU Live when we do Twitch streaming and whatnot out that way. Be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Facebook, just search PlayStation Universe. Twitter is psu.com, all spelled out. And also, always stay tuned to psu.com for all your PlayStation news and coverage and reviews and all that good stuff. So, thanks for listening, and we'll see you guys in the next episode. Take care.
Thanks, guys.